Welcome everyone to Meta Breaker, a series where I make competitive decks around suboptimal cards. The card we'll be looking at today is the Mistcaller. Many see Mistcaller as a very bad card or unplayable in a more competitive environment. However, I think I have found a deck that can utilize Mistcaller's effect best and compete against the top tier decks. Let us look at the deck list. Starting off with spells, we have 2 Earth Shock, Healing Wave, 2 Lightning Storm, and 2 Hex. Now for the minions, we have 1 Acidic Swamp Ooze, 2 Jeweled Scarab, 2 Loot Hoarder, 1 Big Game Hunter, Brand's Bronzebeard, 2 Mind Control Tech, 2 Tuskar Totemic, Defender of Argus, Elise Starseeker, 2 Gnomish Inventor, Antique Healbot, 2 Azure Drake, Lotheb, Sludge Belcher, 2 Fire Elemental, and last but not least, the Mistcaller. The basic concept of this deck is to play a lot of cards that provide immediate value, and that value may come in different forms. For example, Acidic Swamp Ooze provides immediate value by removing a weapon. Big Game Hunter provides immediate value by removing a big minion. Cards like Azure Drake or Gnomish Inventor provide immediate value because they're essentially replacing themselves by generating a card. So that's basically the premise of this deck, is you're playing a lot of cards that are either impacting the board immediately or they're paying for themselves in some fashion. These types of cards are generally called floaters, and the power behind floater cards is the fact that they already pay for themselves, as I've already mentioned. However, they have the ability to also trade into another minion and killing it, providing +1 in card advantage. So let's take an example of this. For example, let's say you play Gnomish Inventor. Gnomish Inventor pays for itself, right? It has drawn a card and therefore replaced itself. However, if you have Gnomish Inventor attack, let's say, an opposing Knife Juggler, that Knife Juggler did not provide a +1. It did not inherently pay for itself when played. So Gnomish Inventor, if it attacks into the Knife Juggler, you have then gained +1 card advantage over your opponent, because Gnomish Inventor has already paid for itself, and then it has also removed an opposing minion. So that is basically the premise of this deck. You are playing cards that pay for themselves, and if you are able to trade into an opposing minion and kill it, you are then gaining card advantage over your opponent. And slowly but surely you will be able to grind them out. As wonderful as that may sound, that sort of optimal trading doesn't happen very often. And that's due to the fact that these minions have lower stat lines. So if you look at all the different minions on the screen, most of those minions aren't able to trade effectively because their stat line is lower than other minions. However, that's where Mistcaller comes into play. Mistcaller is able to make these minions actually a force to be reckoned with. Not only have they paid for themselves, but now they have a very strong stat line, allowing you to trade optimally and efficiently and get the most value out of each and every one of these cards. Whispers of the Old Gods in standard mode are almost upon us. So I want to talk about some cards briefly from the new set that could be included in this deck, plus what this deck would sort of look like if you were to play it in standard mode. The first card I'm really excited to try is Master of Evolution, and there's a couple reasons for this. First reason being is that it has a fantastic body. It's a 4 mana 4/5, which is really, really powerful, plus its effect makes it even better. It's just absolutely fantastic, and it has a lot of synergies in this deck. Obviously there's a synergy with Brand Bronzebeard, of course, where you can change a minion from, like a 4 mana minion or a 3 mana minion and upgrade it by 2 levels, which is really effective and powerful and offers a lot of flexibility. You can also see that Master of Evolution acts as like a heal as well. You can trade into a minion, and if your minion survives, you then play Master of Evolution on it, upgrading it and possibly getting a better stat line and technically healing the minion. And on top of that, a lot of these minions don't have great stat lines, as I mentioned, which is the reason why the Mistcaller is in the deck. So Master of Evolution would sort of follow the same premise. If you played, Gnomish Inventor, Jeweled Scarab, or something along those lines, they're not the best stat line. So Master of Evolution can upgrade those minions and give them a better stat line and allow you to do even more efficient trading. So overall, I think is a fantastic card and would work really, really well in this sort of deck. Next thing from below, I'm really excited about this card as well because I think it would be a good replacement for Belcher in this deck. And I think it also has some synergies in this deck and really good flexibility. Belcher is always going to be 5 mana. Think from Below, though, has flexibility because you can change the mana cost, and it has synergies with Tuskar Totemic. You have your hero power, and then Tuskar Totemic can easily get this card to reduce its stat cost quite quickly. It's just really, really awesome. Oh, and another thing to note about Think from Below, in combination with Master of Evolution, if Think from Below, let's say you reduce the cost of 4 mana, which is pretty reasonable, Master of Evolution wouldn't turn the card into a 5 mana. It's changing the cost on the base cost of the card. So it would make Think from Below a 7 mana card. So that is really, really cool. So Think from Below, I think, would be a great replacement for Belcher. In standard mode, we will be losing Antique Healbot, and I don't know what the meta will look like. I don't know if we will need a healing replacement for Antique Healbot, but in case we do, in case the meta is more aggro-oriented and it doesn't turn out to be control like people expect, then these are 2 possible options that you can use as a replacement. We have Cult Apothecary and Halaziel the Ascended. Now, there's ups and downs to both of these. The benefit of Cult Apothecary is it does have Battlecry in its text, so it does work with Brand's Bronzebeard, so you can get even more healing. Plus, Cult Apothecary doesn't require an extra card to gain healing. Halaziel the Ascended requires you to have a spell in your hand to gain value from the effect. Plus, Halaziel the Ascended is a heal that you would need on, let's say, like turn 8 with Halaziel the Ascended and Lightning Storm. Cult Apothecary could just be played on turn 5 on its own and doesn't require you to do like a turn 8 play. So that's the benefit of Cult Apothecary. However, Cult Apothecary does have a smaller body. It has 2 less health, and in the mid game, having a bigger body is really beneficial for trading. Halaziel has the same body of Druid of the Claw, so that's really powerful and effective. Halaziel, though, can get you possibly more heals than Cult of Apothecary because Halaziel with Lightning Storm is a massive heal, or let's say off of Jeweled Scarab, you're able to get Elemental Destruction. That could be huge. You can heal for a ton. So it really depends on what the meta looks like. Right now, obviously we can't tell because it's not been released yet. We don't know what standard mode is going to be like. However, if you do need heals, these are possible options for you. It really just depends on how the meta looks and shapes to decide which one is better. Well, enough of my rambling. Let's get on with some gameplay. As you guys are watching the game, I'm going to have the deck list on the side there for you so you can review it as I talk about the card choices. Alright guys, I'm just going to go down the list on the right and talk about why I chose these specific cards. First, for Earthshock, I think it's a very powerful card right now in this meta. There's a lot of aggro decks that use very sticky death rattles. We have like Nerubian Egg and Haunted Creeper. Plus we have Shredder, which is very, very prevalent in the meta. It's used in most decks. I find that Earthshock is really helpful when it comes to removing such sticky and nasty minions from the board state. So I really find it useful in those sort of situations, but also against, for example, Secret Paladin. They have Divine Shields, multiple Divine Shields. They use Coghammer as a form of Divine Shield. They also have, you know, shielded mini-bots, things like that. And they also have buffs like Avenge and Blessing of Kings. So being able to remove those minions is very helpful. And even against decks that use Lost Secrets, we also see like Mad Scientist, so Earthshock is very effective in those sort of matchups as well. So overall, I think it's a very powerful card right now, and it's, I think, a must in 2s. Next, Acidic Swamp Ooze. This is very effective against all the different weapon classes, obviously, but the main reason why it's in here is because Aggro Shaman is really deadly against this deck, because Healing Wave and Antique Healbot aren't enough to handle Doomhammer. It's just not enough healing. So Acidic Swamp Ooze is your key to victory against that matchup. If they play Doomhammer and you have Acidic Swamp Ooze and destroy the weapon, you're going to come out way ahead because they've overloaded for 2, and you're going to be able to stabilize then from that point on with Healing Wave and Antique Healbot. And they're not going to have 2 Doomhammers in their hand. They're not going to keep 2. It's just too clunky for them. So they may keep 1 against you and then get rid of the other. And so if you can get rid of the first Doomhammer, you should be able to win the matchup. Next, 2 Jeweled Scarab. This is probably the best card in the deck, or one of the best cards in the deck. I absolutely love this card. It's so incredibly flexible. It just is able to get so many different good 3 mana cards. I would say Shaman is the best class to run Jeweled Scarab. And the reason for that is, well, I'll just go down the list of cards, basically, some of the different cards that you can get. You can get another Healing Wave, so against Freeze Mage or any aggro decks, or decks that are just trying to rush you down, getting an extra Healing Wave can be game-breaking. You can get another Hex for those control matchups or mid-range matchups. You also can get another Lightning Storm against decks that are trying to swarm you or aggro decks. You can get another Big Game Hunter against control decks. You can get another Brand's Bronzebeard to get additional value from your deck because you have so many battle cries. You can get another Mind Control tech to help against aggro matchups. You can get Mana Tide Totem against control matchups to draw cards. You can get Elemental Destruction. You can get Feral Spirit. You know, there's just so many good 3 mana cards. Not only that Shaman has, they have already so many good 3 mana cards, but then you also have some really good neutral 3 mana cards. So the odds of you having a dead draw from Jeweled Scarab is so rare. It's not like you're going to play it and then you're just going to have 3 dead minions that you're like, or 3 dead 3 mana options, I should say. The odds are you're going to see 1 or 2 cards that will be very effective. And so it just has so much flexibility. Odds are you're going to get something really good off of it and be able to make some very valuable plays. Next, Loot Hoarder. The reason why I'm running this over Novice Engineer, because some of you may be wondering why I'm doing that. You may be thinking, well, why aren't you using Novice Engineer? Because that works with Brand's Bronzebeard, plus it's an immediate form of draw versus a delayed form of draw. The reason why I'm using Loot Hoarder is because of the fact that it trades with the early game board state. If my opponent plays Knife Juggler or Flame Imp, I want to have a means of trading. It's not guaranteed, but it is really helpful if I am able to trade with my opponent early. If I have 4 2-mana cards that are 1/1s, then there's just like no way for me to fight for the board early on. Yes, those cards are generating me value and I'm not losing card advantage, but I'm not contesting the board at all. So that's why I use Loot Hoarder in this deck, because I want to be able to contest the board. I want to be able to fight for it, because if I just let them have free reign over the board, I may just end up losing. Next, we have Healing Wave. This may not seem so obvious, but in this deck, you have so many cards that generate value in some fashion, whether it's generating cards for you or they are destroying minions. They're acting as a form of removal. You are generating value over your opponent quite easily, and you're going to beat them in card advantage. You're slowly chipping away at their card advantage. So the only way you can really lose is if you get rushed down or they have some burst combo and can kill you. So Healing Wave is in here to help you stabilize, because you'll eventually outgrind your opponent. It's just going to happen because your cards provide so much value and you're going to be buffing those minions with the Mistcaller. So the only way you're really going to lose is if they somehow manage to burst you. So Healing Wave is a great way to stay alive, and against aggro decks, which are pretty prevalent right now, it's almost guaranteed to heal you for 14 because they run a low curve. So it's really, really effective against those matchups as well. Next, we have Hex. This is really obvious. It's just a great form of removal. Next, we have 2 Lightning Storm. This is also obvious. It's to help keep those aggro decks in check. Next, we have Big Game Hunter, and some of you may be thinking, why are you running 2 Hex and Big Game Hunter? The reason for this is Dr. Boom is prevalent in literally like every single deck. Like, let's be honest, it is used in every single deck except for like this deck, or maybe it's not gonna be used like in Freeze Mage and things like that. But for the most part, it is used in like 90%, if not more, of the top tier decks that you will see in high rank ladder. So the reason why I have it in here is because it can handle Dr. Boom. Plus, it doesn't make me feel like when I'm playing this deck that I have to save my Hex for Dr. Boom. It allows me to play my Hexes a little more aggressively. For example, let's say my opponent throws down a Druid of the Claw, and I would have to trade suboptimally to get past it. I would rather just be able to Hex it and then save that Big Game Hunter for their Dr. Boom. So it allows me to be a little more flexible with my Hexes and make sure that I can make optimal trades and control the board, instead of doing poor trades but have to keep the Hex because I'm afraid that if he has Dr. Boom on turn 7, I won't have an answer. So that's why I have Big Game Hunter in here, because it provides flexibility for those Hexes so I can use them to create optimal trades. Next, we have Brand's Bronzebeard. This is an obvious card choice here. You have so many battle cries in your deck. You can generate so much value from this card. It's insane. But don't feel like you have to save this card for those special wombo combo plays. Sometimes you just have to play it on curve. Sometimes you just have to play it on turn 3 because your opponent plays Knife Juggler on turn 2, and you don't want to leave that on the board, because if you leave it on the board, it's going to get a lot of value, that Knife Juggler. So you should play something that can contest. Brand's Bronzebeard is good for that. Sometimes trading against aggro decks. Plus, those aggro decks will feel like they have to trade into the Brand's Bronzebeard because they don't really know what your deck is, and they don't know if you're going to have like a defender and buff the Brand, or if you'll have Gnomish Inventor and generate a lot of card value against them. So sometimes they will make suboptimal plays and not play on curve just to get rid of the Brand Bronzebeard. So definitely don't feel like you have to save this card for like special wombo combo plays. If you have to play it on turn 3 to play on curve, then do so if you need to. Next, 2 mind control tech, and you may be wondering, wow, 2? Isn't that a bit much? Well, let's think about it. The majority of decks right now are very board control oriented. They're all fighting for the board. You have Zoo, which is fighting for the board very aggressively. We have Secret Paladin, which is fighting for the board aggressively, and they both have means of swarming the board, whether it's Implosion, things like Haunted Creeper or Muster for Battle. They have different means of swarming the board quite easily. So Mind Control Tech is very powerful in those matchups. Druid is fighting for the board as well because they want to have a lot of minions on board so they can just combo you. They want to do Force of Nature, Savage Roar, and combo you and win the game. Plus, as I said, Dr. Boom is very prevalent, so it's like in every single deck, so it's very easy to get off around that time as well, around turn 7, when your opponent will be playing Dr. Boom. And if you're able to steal the Dr. Boom, it's just GG lights out from there, because that's such a massive tempo swing, and you just got a giant minion. It's just a very effective card right now, and if you have to play it on curve, like just play the Mind Control Tech on turn 3 if you have to, against certain matchups, because no one will be expecting the second one. And if you catch them off guard with the first one, they're going to be like, okay, that's probably the only one they're running, and they'll never expect the second one. So they'll overextend again, and you can punish them a second time. Next, Tuskar Totemic. There isn't really any other replacement here. There's no good 3-mana card that like generates immediate value for you. So I just felt like this was the best one, and there's possibilities of getting, like Flame Tongue Totem, which is really powerful. You can get Mana Tide Totem, which is also very powerful. You can also just, get Taunt Totem, things like that. You can also get, I'm blanking on the name, but the 3/4 Totem, I can't remember the name right now. Nope, can't remember it. So the 3/4 Totem for a big tempo swing. Let's say you coin this out on turn 2, you get a 3/2 and a 3/4. That's just really good against like aggro decks. You just get a 3/4 body and a 3/2 body, and you're just able to trade really, really efficiently. Plus, there's some fun combos with Brand's Bronzebeard. You can just swarm the board with totems, and that can be pretty valuable at times. Next, we have Defender of Argus. This is just a really good card against aggro decks and mid-range decks. It just helps buff those minions that don't have a good stat line, so you can do more efficient trading. Plus, it will just help protect your life total with those taunts. So it's just a good card. I used to be running 2, but decided to cut it down to 1 because it's just more effective that way. 2 is a little too much. Next, we have Elise Starseeker. This is to help you against control matchups. It's really, really effective against Control Warrior and Priest. Excuse me. It's very effective against those matchups or any other control decks for that matter. So when you're getting into the fatigue stages of the game, it's just very, very, very powerful and will help you out. Plus, it doesn't actually go clash with the Mistcaller. When you play the Golden Monkey, all the cards in your hand will lose the Mistcaller effect, but all the cards in your deck, all the legendaries in your deck will have the benefit of the Mistcaller. So just a little tip for you when you try this deck out. Next, Gnomish Inventor, very obvious, just a great form of draw. Next is Antique Healbot. Again, another way for you to stabilize and heal against those aggro decks. 2 Azure Drake. This is very good. Again, works really well with your spells. It inherently pays for itself, and it's just a very powerful card. Next, we have Lotheb. This is very good against Druid to stop their combos, good against Freeze Mage, or any decks that you feel like they may, play Brawl or any form of AoE, and you want to maintain your board state. Next, we have Sludge Belcher. This doesn't provide immediate value, but it's just so good against like every matchup. It's just also very effective at protecting your life total. Next, we have Fire Elemental. This is just obvious. It is amazing body with an amazing effect, and it's very good against aggro, very good against mid-range. It's just a very powerful card overall. And then we have the Mistcaller. Well, guys, that wraps up the deck. If you have any questions about mulligans, matchups, or maybe I didn't explain something very well in the card choice section of this video, so if there's any questions that you may have, feel free to post that in the comment section below, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have. I really appreciate you guys watching the video. If you want to stay tuned for future Hearthstone videos or any other videos I may have on my channel, please do subscribe. It'll make it easy for you to stay updated on what I'm posting, but also it's a way for you to support the channel. Anyway, that's it for me, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I will catch you next time.